Hi guys, it's Sean here from digiDirect. Today, we're going to be checking out the brand new Canon M50. This is their newest mirrorless camera. Historically, being a DSLR maker, Canon hasn't had a huge presence in the mirrorless market, but they've been trying to change that the past couple of years with the release of the M5, M6, M100, and now the M50. And we'll see how this camera stacks up and how it progresses that lineup. It does have a couple new features that are firsts for a Canon mirrorless camera, notably a fully articulating LCD screen and the ability to shoot 4K video. We're going to go through all those features though, but we're going to start with a look at the body of the M50. So the M50 actually looks very much like the M5, Canon's top-of-the-line mirrorless. It's a very small camera, easy to pack in a small bag. Body only, it weighs less than 400 grams, and the lenses don't add much beyond that. The overall build quality is nice. I like the feel of the rubberized grip on the side here. It is not a weather-sealed camera though. Notably, we have a viewfinder here at the top, something that the M6 and the M100 don't have, and it's a very nice high-quality EVF, which is sharp and very functional. Another great feature, as I've already mentioned, is the fully articulating LCD screen. This is excellent. One of the biggest complaints about the M5 and the M6 is that the screens flipped up or down, which meant they blocked either the tripod mount at the bottom or the mic mount at the top, both of which were particular impediments for vloggers. So it's great to have a standard fully articulating screen on the M50, lets you shoot more easily from alternate angles, and is particularly useful for video and vlogging, which we'll see is a big focus of the M50. Button-wise, the M50 has a fairly basic setup. It does have only one control dial, not two. So in full manual mode, you do have to toggle between using that dial to control shutter speed, aperture, and exposure compensation. The menu system on the M50 is quite strong. It's a version of Canon's newer menus that are very clean. They've got some handy tips that make them easier to navigate for newer photographers, and they are particularly friendly for touchscreen use, which is a very natural way to use this camera. They're very easy to navigate. On the side here, we have a microphone input, so we can mount external mics on here, another benefit for video use, although there is no headphone output, so we can't monitor that audio other than using on-screen volume meters. The battery is the somewhat small LPE17, which is rated for 235 shots, which is not a huge rating, so you'll probably want to consider having some spares on hand. Lastly, the camera has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC, and you can set it up to automatically send each picture that you take to your phone. So inside the M50 is a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. That's pretty standard stuff for Canon here. That's basically the same sensor that's in the M5, the 80D, a couple other Canon cameras. But it's a very tried and true sensor. It does a very good job, it gets excellent picture quality, good video quality, it's a good megapixel count. So while it's not, groundbreakingly new, it is very, very high quality and definitely a good quality sensor in there, absolutely. They're also debuting their new Digic 8 processor in here. This is the first camera to have that. So that new processor is one of the reasons why we can shoot 4K on this camera. The autofocus system in the M50 has between 99 and 143 autofocus points, depending on which lenses you're using with it. And it does have Canon's excellent dual pixel AF system in here. Another tried and true Canon system. It does a very, very good job. It's one of the best ones on the market. Very fast and responsive. It's particularly effective at focusing in live view or for video, which is what I keep alluding to here, if you'll notice. They also have added a new feature, which is eye detect autofocus. We've seen this in some other camera brands before. It's the first time in a Canon camera where the camera is going to focus on your subject's eye. This is particularly useful for portrait photography, where you want to make sure that your subject's eye is in focus. And it does a pretty good job at that. Also, the camera can shoot at up to 7 frames per second burst shooting. So that's good for capturing fast movement, and 7 frames per second is decently fast, very solid. It should be noted though that the buffer on the camera is very small. It's only about 10 shots. So you're not going to have long strings of burst shots, so it's definitely not a sports camera in that way. But if you've got some, quick frames of fast action, you can definitely use the burst shooting effectively there. So now let's touch on video in the M50, and here's where we're going to get into a little bit of that controversy. So the M50 has a lot of potential as a vlogging camera. It's small and compact, lightweight, easy to use, got that excellent dual pixel autofocus in there, and it has finally a fully articulating LCD screen so you can turn it around and you can see yourself when you're shooting yourself. And on top of that, we also can now shoot 4K video on the M50, which is a first for a Canon mirrorless camera. And the 4K looks gorgeous. It's got that classic Canon look. It's very sharp. However, there are some limitations when shooting in 4K, and here's where some of that controversy comes in. So when you're shooting in 4K, you can't use the dual pixel autofocus system. It defaults down to a contrast-based detection system, which is definitely less effective than the excellent dual pixel AF. Fairly unfortunate because the dual pixel AF system is so good, and in 1080, it works really, really well. You just can't use it in 4K. The other thing is that there's a fairly significant crop in 4K. So you'll see here, I'm shooting from the same position in 1080 and then into 4K. That's a big crop factor there. Again, if we're looking at the vlogging perspective, that means it's going to be somewhat difficult to get wide enough of a shot with the camera when you're holding it at arm's length to not be, just a huge face shot. So there definitely are some obstacles here. But with that in mind, let's do a quick test comparing the 4K and the 1080 for vlogging. Now I'm doing a little vlogging test here in 4K. I've got the standard 15 to 45 mil lens on there, the kit lens, at 15 millimeters. Now I am using a little kind of like a Joby mini tripod to give me a little bit extra reach. Vloggers often use this to hold their camera better and give them a bit extra reach. But we can see when I'm doing that, it's not too zoomed in to be useful in a vlogging setting. The autofocus, is a little bit trickier because let's see if I come in and out here, how well it follows me. Hard to tell on the screen here, but it is going to be not quite as steady as the dual pixel AF that we can use in 1080, which we'll try now. But it's still not an impossible way to use the camera for vlogging. So now we've jumped down to 1080, still using the 15 to 45 mil lens at 15 mil. That's a lot wider of a frame, obviously. To be honest, I probably don't really need to be even using this selfie stick now. If I hold the camera by the camera body itself, I can still get a frame that's wide enough to use without the selfie stick if need be. But the dual pixel autofocus is also a lot better here. So for example, you'll notice that it's a lot more competent as I move around, change my position in the frame. It's a lot better at tracking me than it was in 4K. So it's definitely easier to do in 1080, and I still think it looks very good in 1080. But I think it was still usable in 4K as well. Another test here, now I've switched to the 11 to 22 millimeter lens, so the wide angle lens. Again, I'm in 4K now using the stick, and we've got a bit more of a wider perspective. I probably don't even need to use the stick here, so if I hold the camera just by the camera itself here, it's still wide enough for me to use this as a vlogger. And then if I jump to the stick and get a bit extra reach on there as well, very usable still. So if you want to chuck the wide angle lens on there, again, another way to get wider angles without even needing a little selfie stick there. And then just for the sake of comparison here, this is the wide angle lens at 11 millimeters using the selfie stick. And again, if I hold it by the camera body itself, not the stick, still very wide. So I don't want to gloss over those issues in 4K shooting. Those are obstacles and issues. I do wish you didn't have the crop factor, and if you could shoot with the dual pixel AF in 4K, that would be great. However, if you were looking around internet forums and so on, you might get the impression that it's unusable and garbage. People are all up in arms about it. I don't think that's the case either. There are issues, but you can definitely still get very, very good 4K footage out of this camera. There are ways around the crop factor, and again, if you're not using it exactly for vlogging, it's way less of an issue. My GH4 that I shoot all my videos with has a crop factor as well, and it hasn't killed me. So there are ways around that, and if you jump into 1080, all those issues disappear. The dual pixel AF works well, works excellently well. You don't have that crop factor. But even so, if we're only looking at 4K, I still think that you can get some very, very good 4K footage out of this, and it's definitely usable as a 4K camera. So overall, I was pretty impressed with the M50. I liked it quite a bit. It's small and compact, lightweight, easy to use. It has very good picture quality. The EVF here and the articulating LCD screen are great. The dual pixel autofocus system is very effective. And the 4K video, while not without its issues, is usable and functional. I think it's also tied together a lot better by the price point of this camera. It's about $1,000 Australian for the kit, including the kit lens. I think that's a much more value-centric price point for this camera compared to the M5 or the M6, which I think are a little bit more premium. I definitely think the M50 is the best camera in Canon's mirrorless lineup to date for sure. I do still wish Canon had more lenses for their mirrorless cameras. There are a couple, but they really need to start expanding those options. Nonetheless, the M50 is Canon's best mirrorless camera to date. Now, it is out now. You can order it on our website at www.digidirect.com.au, or you can come into one of our stores, in which case you can test it out for yourself. We have stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia. Thanks, guys. Take care.